The average financial advisor charges 1% of your portfolio each year. On a $400,000 account, that's $4,000 before the market has moved a single point. Most clients have never seen that number written down. They sign the agreement, they receive quarterly statements, and somewhere on page 3 of the disclosure, there's a rate. Nobody translated it into a dollar figure. That gap between the percentage on file and what it actually costs every year is where this video starts. This isn't an argument against financial advisors. Some of them are worth every dollar they charge, and I'll walk through the framework for figuring out whether that's true in your own situation. But before you can evaluate the relationship honestly, you need to understand what you're paying, not as a rate, but as a number. And then what that number would have become if it had stayed in the account and kept compounding over the next 20 years. A stands for Assets Under Management. It's the fee model that now dominates the advisory industry. More than 77% of advisors charge this way, a share that has been climbing for years. The structure is straightforward. The advisor takes a fixed percentage of your account balance each year in exchange for managing your investments. The standard rate sits between 0.75% and 1.5%, with 1% being the most common number for portfolios in the $500,000 to $1 million range. The logic of the model is that it aligns incentives. When your balance grows, the advisor earns more. When it shrinks, they earn less. That framing is what made AUM the industry default, and it's a reasonable argument on its face. Percentage pricing does something else at the same time, though. It makes the fee feel small. When someone describes a charge as 1%, your brain processes it roughly the same way it processes a 1% line on a service receipt. A rounding error, barely worth the mental effort. This isn't specific to finance. It's how percentage framing works on human cognition. Detached from a dollar base, rates feel abstract and easy to dismiss. For most people who signed an AUM agreement, the fee conversation happened once, at account opening, when attention was on what the advisor would do rather than what they would charge. The percentage was disclosed. The dollar figure it implied almost never was. The typical arrangement follows a similar pattern: an annual review meeting, quarterly portfolio statements, and access to the advisor for questions. Some include tax planning coordination or referrals to estate attorneys when the need arises. Whether 1% is the right price for that package depends on the complexity of your situation and on which parts of the service are actually being used. Here's what the percentage framing doesn't show you. The fee isn't taken from your gains, it's taken from your balance, the principal that would otherwise be compounding. When your advisor deducts 1% of a $400,000 account, $4,000 leaves the portfolio. Those dollars don't just disappear in the present, they stop existing in the future too. At 6% annual growth, $4,000 left in the account would have become approximately $12,800 over 20 years. You don't just lose the fee. You lose everything those dollars would have grown into. And because the charge is percentage-based, the cost doesn't hold flat as the account grows. The advisor bills 1%, whether your balance is $400,000 or $700,000. As you contribute more and the market compounds, the annual dollar cost climbs automatically. No renegotiation, no updated agreement, no notification required. The fee scales with your portfolio year after year. That's the mechanism. Not a one-time transaction, but a recurring drag on compounding that runs for as long as the arrangement continues. Let's put real portfolio sizes against this. A $312,000 balance, a reasonable figure for someone in their early 40s contributing consistently to a 401k and a taxable brokerage account, generates a first-year AUM fee of $3,120. That amount leaves the portfolio before it can compound. Over 20 years at 6% annual growth, the total drag, not just the fees paid, but the compounding those dollars would have produced had they stayed in the account, works out to approximately $84,600. That figure isn't built on aggressive assumptions. It's what standard math produces at a standard return rate. The way I think about it, these numbers aren't a reveal. They're what happens when a percentage runs against compounding long enough. Most clients haven't done the math because nobody presented the fee in terms that invited it. Here's the thing about the dollar cost: it doesn't stay fixed as years pass. On a $312,000 account in year one, the fee is $3,120. By year 12, if the portfolio has grown as expected, you're paying over $6,000 under the same agreement at the same rate without anyone reviewing whether the terms still make sense. Move further along. A couple in their mid-50s with $628,000 in managed assets pays $6,280 per year. Compare that account over 25 years against a portfolio in low-cost index funds at 0.05%, the kind available through Vanguard or Fidelity. And the gap in final balance lands around $287,000. Same contributions, same market exposure, different fee structure. No outperformance required, just compounding running at full rate on one side and reduced by roughly 1% every year on the other. At $1.1 million, the first-year fee is $11,000. The 20-year drag on that account against a low-cost alternative crosses $400,000. These are ordinary portfolio sizes at ordinary return rates. There's nothing unusual in the math, just the standard effect of 1% leaving a compounding account year after year. The comparison that brings this into sharpest relief is the flat fee model. A fee-only advisor charging hourly typically runs between $200 and $400 per hour. For a client who needs roughly 6 hours of attention per year, an annual plan review, tax coordination, one significant financial decision, that comes to $2,400. Against a $6,280 AUM fee for an equivalent scope of work, the annual difference is $3,880. Compounded at 6% over 20 years, that gap amounts to approximately $127,000 in foregone growth. Let me show you what I mean by default cost. You would notice a $6,000 line item on your annual tax return. You would scrutinize a $6,000 service contract before signing. Expressed as 1% on an account statement, the same number tends to pass without comment. Not because you're careless, but because the framing removes the context that normally triggers scrutiny. The percentage is disclosed. The invoice, in dollar terms, rarely is. Most clients paying AUM fees have been paying a bill they've never seen written out. And unlike most service contracts, that bill grows automatically as the portfolio grows. None of this means the AUM model is always the wrong structure. If your financial life is genuinely complex, business ownership, estate planning needs, multiple income sources, or a real history of making emotionally driven decisions during market downturns, an advisor who actively manages those dimensions provides genuine value. Vanguard has estimated that behavioral coaching alone, specifically preventing clients from selling during market drops, can add roughly 1.5% in annual value when it's actually being delivered. If you know from experience that your advisor has kept you invested during periods when you would have otherwise sold, that represents a concrete return on the fee. But most AUM clients don't have complex situations. They have a retirement account, a brokerage account, and a need for periodic guidance and reassurance. That service is worth paying for. It doesn't necessarily cost 1% of a compounding balance every year for the rest of your investing life. A comprehensive financial plan from a flat fee advisor typically runs $2,400 to $3,000. Hourly advice for a straightforward situation costs a fraction of what AUM generates annually on a mid-sized portfolio. I've seen this pattern enough to say it plainly. The clients who asked their advisor to express the fee in dollars tended to make better decisions afterward, whether they stayed in the relationship or moved to a different structure. Before your next annual review, 3 questions are worth sitting with. What is your fee in dollars this year? Not the percentage, but the actual figure. And what does it project to in 5 years as the balance grows? What specific services does that fee include, and which of those did you actually use in the past 12 months? And given your situation specifically, what would equivalent work cost from a flat fee or hourly advisor? These questions don't require you to end the relationship. They require you to understand it. Percentages are useful in many parts of personal finance. This isn't one of them. A fee that represents 1% of $312,000 today will represent 1% of $624,000 in 12 years if the portfolio performs as expected. The dollar amount doubles without any renegotiation, without a change in the agreement, without anyone sending a notification. The percentage holds constant while the actual cost compounds alongside the account. The advisor worth keeping is the one willing to show you the fee as a dollar figure this year and projected forward. That conversation happens less often than it should. The clients who initiate it almost always end up better positioned, regardless of which direction it goes. 1% was designed to live in the background. The only honest way to evaluate it is to pull it into the same terms you use to measure everything else. If you want to understand how fees fit into the broader sequence of financial decisions, the next video picks up from here. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.